So what I want to do in this lesson, I want to actually pull out our SQL queries and send it over into our index page, because from previously we've just been using it within Bootstrap, and that's probably not the best way to go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close off this connection option, and I'm going to bring index over to there. So we're going to be working with this index file, and what we've done here is we've just done that require once to require Bootstrap. And so I'm going to pull out all of this information here, because I don't actually want to be calling through all of what we have here before. All I want Bootstrap is to have these connection settings, and that way we can work with the index file, and then we can use Bootstrap as a way to kind of launch our application and start beginning to structure our PHP better, and then pulling in content that we want to pull in on that actual PHP page. We're going to pull it in on the index page that we're going to be using. So now I'm going to just get rid of that. I'm going to change it to the no split. And I'm going to get rid of that as well, because we're only going to be using the procedural from now. And maybe I'm going to set a variable there. Just call it output. And I'm going to output this content. And I get rid of all of this stuff I have here. And I'm just going to call it MyDatabase output. And I'm going to use the short form to output content in, or output a variable in PHP. I'm just going to call it output, and I'm going to output it within the actual code there. So out of that structure. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this, but for the purposes of this lesson, because we are calling the database right on the page, we're just going to simply output it within content div. And over here we're going to be writing out our output. So this is going to be our PHP code here at the top, and the HTML is simply going to be used to output the content so that it's more viewable, and it's going to be outputting in our format, so we can actually start changing some values and do some updates so it looks like a real web page. So there's our content right there. I'm going to actually add in some styling as well. So this will add in some styling, and now we can actually begin to work with the different queries. So I'm going to go back out, so that's what the page is going to look like now. So we get our output there, so it's a little bit more visible. And now, so what we did in the previous one, we had our email, so another at email.com. And we can specify an ID, or we could leave it blank. But if we do specify an ID, then we got to make sure that's not going to be an existing ID. So that's why it's good to always leave it blank when it's this type of primary. So from here, I can just simply copy that, go back out to my code, and now I'm going to do a new query. So I've got insert into. Now I don't have to, so I can do insert into newsletter because I already have the database defined, that new data defined. I can get rid of ID because this is going to be null anyway. And I'm going to just call it another to ID. So now when I go out to my page and refresh it, okay, so it looks like we've got an error there, an issue there on line 6. So take a look and see what the problem there is. And looking at that, I simply had forgotten that semicolon at the end there. So just go back out and refresh it. And so it looks like we've got a problem there as well, because it expects a parameter, because we're actually doing an insert instead. So we'll probably have to get rid of that. But we can see that it actually did insert that. And because our query was an insert instead of a query looking, selecting, we have to make sure that our methods that we're using also match. So this method really wouldn't apply because we're actually doing an insert. So we got to comment those out, change this to 3, go back out and refresh it, and that. Okay, so we're still getting an error there because again I'm asking for that output there for number of rows and stuff. So I got to simply comment that out as well. Go back out, refresh it one more time, and so I need to also set a variable for outputs. So a few different issues here that so I'm just going to write inserted there. And one last time. So now we don't have any issues or errors that are showing up, and I've actually popped in a whole bunch of those same ones, so 3 there in a row. But this is how you use the queries to start beginning to insert in and add data to your database using your PHP code and MySQL. So it's the same thing that you get output here, and with phpMyAdmin you always see these outputs here. So again, the select all from newsletter, this is the same thing that we had over here, and this is just printing out all of the available rows, columns from the newsletter table.